Everyone, Fru here. Welcome to today's lecture. So guys, in today's lecture, we're going to be talking about classes within programming. So classes within programming, or more specifically, we're going to be talking about OOP. Let me type that correctly, OOP, which stands for Object-Oriented Programming within Python. And the concepts we'll be looking at is defining classes, class inheritance, importing libraries into Python, and more. Let me actually specify that, importing libraries into Python and more. So guys, before we dive in, I just want to make a little bit of a comment about this particular module, right? Module 8. And it's because this is a little bit sentimental to me, making this particular module where we're talking about classes and object-oriented programming, because I remember vividly back many years ago in college, when I was still learning programming, at the time learning in Java. This was one of the most challenging concepts I had to grapple with, and I can still remember it vividly, where it just did not make sense to me, understanding the names and the terms I was saying. All right, so I was saying things like an object and a class and a method and inheritance, polymorphism. I just could not make sense of all of that. So I really at the very beginning, if I did not give up if I had to give up programming, it was gonna be because of this topic, and I'm so glad that I didn't. And I kind of struggled through it. There was one of a friend of mine who actually sat with me one time in the cafeteria, and we had a homework to do, and I really still was I was struggling, and he kind of like just explained it to me. I don't remember what happened, but it clicked, and then I went home that night and I was like, I get it, I know what the class is, and I know what the method is, and I know what an object is, and from that day there's no looking back. All right, and I was talking about Java, and now I'm talking about Python, and if you throw any language at me, all those concepts kind of make sense to me. So this is a little bit of a sentimental video, and I really wanted to take this beginning to just give a little bit of a personal story, to share my personal story, because I know a lot of us, as we go through this particular module, might say this is a difficult concept. Maybe Fru is not explaining it well, or I don't get it. Guys, it's okay. It's okay. If you don't get it, it's okay too. It might just take a little bit of time. My hope is that I'm gonna explain it in a way that makes sense. But if it doesn't, guys, this is very challenging. But I can guarantee you one thing: once you get it, once you kind of know what's going on, there's no language in this planet that's gonna be more difficult, that will be challenging for you to program. That's it. There'll be no looking back. All right, because that's what happened to me, and I can confidently say that if I could get it, I can get over that hump. Anyone can do it. So that said, just a quick refresher from this again: classes, inheritance, and importing libraries into Python. Let me actually again update this: importing using libraries within Python. A lot of the detailed readings that I came across, I found in the web. So Data Camp, they had some tutorials around functions in Python, and kind of some of them talked about classes as well. One way I actually leveraged this a lot to create the content for this was Tutorial Point. They had a whole series around Python classes, which was really it fed a lot of the content for this course. So definitely check that out for Tutorial Point. I give them a lot of credit for putting together a lot of content which helped me build together this course. So Tutorial Point is something to check out as well. Guys, if you don't have a link to this code, it's gonna be in the description below. So if you're watching this on YouTube, it's gonna be in the description below, the link to my GitHub, or wherever you're watching this. I'm gonna make available the link to my GitHub. Once you go to my GitHub account, you can clone my repository and have access to every single one of this code that we're working with. So that said, I went on Google and did a quick search for classes, all right, or object-oriented programming, and class is really one thing that we're going to be talking about today. And the definition I came across, let's read it and then have a little bit of a conversation. So it says, in object-oriented programming, a class is a blueprint for creating objects, right? And in quotes, it says an object is a particular data structure providing initial values for state, member variables and attribute, and implementation of behavior, member functions or methods. All right, a user-defined objects are created using class keywords. All right, I don't know if this makes sense to you, but if somebody hasn't programmed before and you try to get them to read this, this will probably just blow their mind away. And this is what happened to me. And I read this over and over. Sometimes I read it today and I'm like, it still doesn't make sense. All right, fortunately it does make sense to me, but I can see how it doesn't make sense to people. So there are a couple of words that we're going to be seeing, a couple of topics that I might mention them just out of wrath because I kind of say them too much, but I'll try to make sure that I don't do that, that I try to explain every single thing that we're dealing with. So that will be talking about objects, talking about classes, methods, inheritance, polymorphism, data abstraction, encapsulation. If you're dealing with object-oriented programming, these are key concepts that you need and have to be familiar with, right? If somebody's talking about this is a class, these are the methods of the class, you need to know what they're talking about, right? You might go for an interview, they start talking about explain polymorphism. To me, guys, you should know how to explain that. Very, very important. All right. That said, we're going to switch over into our working area, clear up the canvas, start anew, and we're going to see how we can create classes within Python. And we're going to create a class, and then we're going to take that class to create an object. All right. So that said, let's start with our very first class. So think about a class as just being a representation of a real world or anything that you can imagine. There could be a class for animals. There could be a class for cars. There could be a class for people. There could be a class for food, for meals, for customer, for patients. There could be a class for really anything that you can come up. All right. Now, what we're going to do here is to write a program that is going to handle cars for us. Let's say we're a car dealership as an example. We have different kind of cars and we want to figure out the prices for that car. So what we're going to do is introduce this concept of a class, and we're going to create a class of car. All right. So the way we do that is we simply start with class. All right. And we give it a name. Actually, we'll give it a name vehicle. Very, very simple. Unlike functions where we have this, right? For a class, we don't have that yet. We'll simply call it class and we give it a name called vehicle. Now, this class has certain characteristics. Let me zoom in again. All right, that we want to give to this class. And what do those characteristics look like? All right, a vehicle could maybe have a name. All right, that's legitimate. A vehicle could have what? It could have a kind of a vehicle, or maybe call it model of that vehicle. That's totally fine, right? Actually, let's call a vehicle kind, because model is a little bit different. Let's call it car. All right, and the vehicle could have what other characteristic can the vehicle have? It could have a color. All right, and we can give that color to be something. We can give it a value. What else are the attributes of a vehicle? What else are the characteristics of a vehicle? What else is unique to a vehicle? And so attributes are what we're basically defining to this class of a vehicle. So a vehicle could have what? A color. We've seen the color. It could have a value, right? Value which could be price, and that value could be, say, $100, and we can call this price. All right, and we can go on. It could have value is not spelled correctly. It could have many more things, right? We can go ahead and say it could have transmission, and we can say what kind of transmission it has, right? We can set all of that. We can talk about does it have a roof, a moon roof, right? Does it have a four-wheel drive, right? We can go ahead and specify all the attributes that we want to define this class. So that's basically what the class is. It's simply take any object that you want. It could be person. If I was defining a class for a person, I would say class person, and I'll ask, what does a person have? What are the attributes of a person? The person has an eye color, eye size, mouth, lips, hand, race, clothes that they have on, income, right? Whatever it is that you want for your class, you can go ahead and define that, and those are your attributes for those class. Now, in Python, a class has attributes, but in addition to that, all right, it also has methods. All right, and we can define. We saw in previous modules how we define functions. We can also define those functions within classes, but if you define a function within a class, it's simply called a method. So let's go ahead and define a simple function here within this class, and we're going to call that function vehicle description. All right, let's just call this vehicle description, and we'll pass it as self. All right, that's automatic within Python. Okay, so don't worry about self. It's just simply talking about the self is that this is the car. This particular car is what we're dealing with. So let's just set something here. We're gonna print the description of that vehicle to the screen. So let's just do some quick string manipulations here. All right, we're already familiar with working with strings. So basically, I'm gonna set a couple of placeholders here. All right, and one more placeholder to be set up here. So let's do $, and that dollar would be to F. All right, and now since we're doing string placeholders, we're gonna pass in the actual values now. So this is just basic string manipulation. If you're not familiar with this, guys, go ahead and watch my videos on string. So we're gonna pass in name of the car. So it's gonna take the name here and it's gonna put it in here. So name is S, and then that S would be we're gonna put in self.color. All right, and then at the end we're gonna put in self.kind, and then we're gonna put in self.value. So we're gonna simply take those attributes of a car and print them to the screen. And at the very end, once we've set description, we're gonna return that description. Okay, so let's just do a quick recap. We've talked about this concept of a generic abstract car that just imagine any car, right? Nothing has been specific yet. The car could have a name. It could, it could be actually a generic vehicle. We know vehicle is more than a car. A vehicle is any moving thing. It could be a car, it could be a lorry, it could be a truck, but in this case we're working with a car. So that's why the kind of vehicle is a car. All right, and then it could have a color. We don't know what the color is. It could have a name. We don't know what the name is. It could have a value. Well, in this case we're giving an initial value, but we don't know that yet. We're simply just putting placeholders, and those placeholders are called attributes. Okay, attributes. Now we've defined this function within this class, which is a method, and that function is just simply going to take all those attributes of a car and it's going to print them on the screen, and it's going to simply say, all right, whatever the name of that car is, and the worth, it's going to print that on the screen. It's going to take the name of the car is worth so and so money. All right, it's going to print that for us on the screen. Guys, this is at bare minimum the definition of a class. So a class is just an abstract entity. Abstract. All right, very abstract, an abstract entity. Now what if we want to actually get a specific car? Now this is where we have to instantiate the class. All right, if this doesn't make sense, just bear with me. So we need to instantiate that class, and the way we instantiate the class is very simple. All right, so let me put to get an object. All right, the way we instantiate the class is very simple. So what we do here is we can have a new a variable or a new object in here. We call it car1. All right, and that car1 will be of class vehicle. All right, so we've just simply said there is this car, which is a vehicle, but again we don't know what that car is. But for us to start specifying what that car is, we need to start providing the details of that car. All right, so this is an object. An object, let me actually write that out. Car1 is an object. All right, this is a class. This is an object. So basically an object is an instance of a class. That's it. An object is an instance of a class. All right, if you can just keep repeating it over and over and over again, all right, an object is an instance of a class, an object is an instance of a class, an object is an instance of a class. That's basically what it is. Took me a while for this to click. All right, a class is just a description, generic, nothing has been done yet. Now, once you go and set some value to say equals to this, and once you say vehicle, this parenthesis will simply initiating it. So now we're ready to get a specific vehicle. Now we can go ahead and say car1 dot, right? You see, it gives us, let me go back here, dot, you see, it gives me this attribute, right? Value, color, or value, kind, color, name, and the object here is, the class here is vehicle. All right, so it's asking me, you can actually now specify the details of this car that you're trying to create. So think about us, we're trying to create a brand new car, right? So what is the value of that car? What is the name of that car? What is the color of that car that you're trying to create? This is now an object that can actually exist because you're telling me what the value is, what the kind is, and then I can say, all right, this is something that actually exists. It's not just longer a generic concept of a car. All right, so I can say car.name, right? Give it a name, and the name we can give will be, of course, Toyota, one of my favorite cars, right? It could be a Toyota. All right, so now not only do we have an object with now specifying the values of that object. All right, we can say car.car1, since we're still dealing with car1 dot color equals, and we can give it a color here, red. All right, so we're instantiating specific values of that car. So in here we had the attributes. We just defined, God, I didn't even spell attributes correctly. Attributes, I guess that's correct. So we just simply put in placeholders, but now we're specifying details of that car. All right, and this is now an object. So this is no longer a class. This is an instance. So let me write this here. An object is an instance of a class. All right, repeat this as many times as you want to understand it, guys. Once you understand this, there's no going back. Times 1 million, right? You repeat it times 1 million times, is so that it sticks. An object is an instance of a class. The day that this clicked in my head, guys, I literally went on my knees and I prayed to the Lord and thanked him for making me understand this. All right, this is what people struggle with a lot. The people that I see struggling with programming is just understanding this, and the moment they get it, that's like easy. Everything after that is easy. So now let's continue. Car 1 is a vehicle, but we don't only have to create car 1. We can create many kind of cars. Let's go ahead and create car 2. All right, and car 2 is what? It's still a vehicle. All right, but now we can set car 2. What's the name of car 2? We can put any name. We can say, what do we want car 2 to be? We want it to be a Honda. All right, car 2 dot color. Let's do car 2 dot name equals Honda. Car 2 dot color equals what? Let's make it blue. But we don't need only car 2. We can go ahead and create car 3. All right, and still a vehicle. All right, so now you can instantiate as many objects of that class, right? That's the power of classes. Car 3 dot name equals what? I know Tesla these days is very popular. So for those Tesla electric fans, we gotta put something out there, and we're gonna get car 3. Then what else were we setting? The color equals black. All right, and so guys, now you can instantiate as many objects of that classes and give them different attributes and change all these attributes to match that. All right, so let's try something. Let's go ahead now and print on the screen. So what we're gonna do is we're gonna print car 1. All right, that's the first object, remember, and we're gonna print the color of, or let's print the color of car 1. Car 1 the color. All right, and then let's actually just run this and see what it prints, because we've set the color to red. So let's print car1 that color. See, it tells us red. All right, in here this class didn't have any color, but we've created an object. We said the color is red to this particular attribute, and once we print it, it gives us red. Now if I say something else, I want to say car1, guess what? I can print the colors of the car, or I can access the methods within that class. All right, so I can access this method. We saw how we can call functions, right? I can access the function. Remember, a method is simply a function inside our class. That's basically what a method is, a function inside the class. So if I access this function inside this class, I can access it like the way we normally call functions, but all in that case I need to do is I have to tell what the object is, and that object is car1, and I can say dot vehicle description, and I can access that function. All right, and now I can say car1, tell me your vehicle description. Right, so it's gonna call that function to tell me the vehicle description. There is no parameter here. Self is not considered a parameter, so just imagine that self is not a parameter. You can add parameters, but self is not a parameter. All right, I can explain that into more details, but that's for a more advanced concept. So just always assume that self is just something you have to put there. Now if I say car1 dot vehicle description, and if I run this, guys, see what happens. It gives me an issue. I feel like we're missing something here. And what is it are we missing? Put in the space. Let's try this one more time. All right, let me just check to be sure what my syntax is a little bit off. So printing that, and this is why programming is fun, guys. Sometimes you run into issues. Let's do this one more time here. All right, because I didn't have enough parameters. So 1, 2, 3. Okay, that makes sense. That dollar. All right, 12. All right, okay, let's try that. There you go. All right, I was missing one parameter here. You gotta be careful as we're typing this very fast. Okay, so what we've done here is simply said print vehicle.description. Now it's gonna access this method for this particular class, and it's gonna print the name, the color, and we're passing in the name, the color, the kind, the value, and we'll print it down on the screen. And so here it says Toyota is a red car worth $100. All right, very, very powerful, guys. This is an instance of a class. Now we had a different class. I can go ahead and print car 2, car 3, right? Those cars now have different attributes because an object exists separate from the class. Remember, here we are dealing now with an object. We're no longer just dealing with a class. An object is an instance of a class. So first we have to instantiate that class, set the values, and once we've done that, we have an object. So if I go ahead and run this, so you can see Toyota is a red car worth that. Honda is a blue car worth this. Tesla is a black car worth this. Now, these are objects that we've created, and we're simply printing out the attributes of that object. Guys, very, very, very powerful. All right, if you wanted to change the value of that class, we can go ahead and change it. Nothing stops us from saying car1 dot value, even though we said the value that equals 10,000 as an example. We can go ahead and say car2 the value equals 3,000 and keep the previous one as such. All right, so we can always change any attribute within that class. All right, guys, so very, very powerful, very, very powerful. I hope this makes sense, because guys, in programming, I say this from that position of me sitting in front of my IDE and hearing class and object and really not having any idea what it was. I hope this kind of gives you an idea. I hope this kind of really explains it and breaks it down for you. All right, guys, so just to recap, a class is just an abstract entity with attributes and methods. That's basically it. We can go into things like constructors and other things that we might have to deal with, but For now, don't even worry about those terms. Just worry about what are the attributes of the class, what are the methods available in that class. Now, once you have that, we can now go into, all right, there is this class. How can I instantiate that class? Instantiating means how can I create an object from that class? And the way you do it is simply just say set any value and equals to the name of the class in brackets. That's it. If the constructor of the class, I hate to use constructor here, but it's a very important term coming down the line. If the constructor has parameters, then you pass in those parameters for the constructors. If it doesn't, like the way I have it here, just put the name of the class in brackets, right? In open and close brackets, and then you can set any of the parameters and you can call any method within that class, like the way we did. All right, so there you have it, defining a class. Now I'm going to cancel all of this because it's gonna take us into the next module that we're gonna look at for this. First of all, the module that we just looked at was module 8.1. all right, defining a class. Now the module that we're gonna move into will be module 8.1.1, which is class inheritance, and you can read more about class inheritance from this link on tutorials point. It's a very, very powerful link. I really, really liked it. It inspired a lot of the content for this particular lecture. So guys, check out tutorial point, bookmark them, follow them, subscribe to them. Very, very great content. So we've seen a class, we've seen an object, an instance of a class. Now, what is the idea of inheritance? All right, so think about it. You have a child. A child can inherit from a parent. Just forget about programming for now. Let's just step outside and think of a child. All right, so you have a child and you have a parent. What can the child inherit from the parent? All right, a child can inherit like say the house, their color, money, you know, different things, height, right, genius level, many things, right? IQ, I said genius level, IQ, many things a child can inherit from their parents. So if a parent has a house, you can naturally say, if the child inherits a house with the parents, therefore that house is the child's house, right? You can just simply associate that house to the child, and that is inheritance. All right, so that's how we kind of think about inheritance in the real world. Now, how can we think about inheritance within programming? It's simply saying that if you have a class, and we saw classes in the previous concept, creating a class. If you have a class and the class has a set of attributes or it has a set of methods, and you have another class that claims to inherit from that previous class, then all those methods and those attributes follow along to the new class. That's inheritance, pure and simple. So let's actually do it using the parents of a child and the example of a child and their parent. So first of all, let's start with the parent, right? Because that's where we have to start. So we have a class called parent. So we're going to just simply create a new class called parent. All right. And we're going to give the parent name. All right. Let's call that mother, right? I can give any parent name that you want. And I'm going to define a couple of our functions in here. So this is print, just bear with me. I'm going to try to get this all really quick. So this is a constructor. I haven't spoken much about this, but just make sure that we have this in the code. So we're gonna initialize that's a constructor for that method, for that class, sorry. And then we're gonna have a couple of methods here. So def, we'll call it parent method. So we're gonna define a couple of methods. Again, a method is a function within a class. So all of what I'm doing here is I'm just creating a couple of functions, but those functions are basically within the class. So I'll call this calling parent method. So this init is just it's just a method that has to be in any class to initialize a class. All right, and then now I'm defining a new method in here called parent method. Every method needs to have a self, and then the other parameters, but this has no other parameter. So I'm just gonna say each time we call this method, it's gonna print calling parent method. That's basically what we're trying to do there. All right. And then how about we define a couple of other methods here? Say set name. All right. And this method now is gonna take a value called name. All right. So if you think about the function that takes in a parameter, this method set name, in addition to self, that's why self is a different color, is gonna take this parameter called name. And what we're gonna do is we're gonna say parents, right? Because we're doing parent name. I think did I call it parent or parents? Let's actually just call that parent so that we can resolve this. So parents dot parent name. Oh, I can type correctly. Parent dot parent name. All right, equals to name. So we have this variable here called parent name. What we're saying is that in this particular method is that whatever you give me, I'm going to take whatever you give me, which is this value here, and I'm going to make it to be this parent name. So it's going to replace whatever I've set here as a parent name. So that's one of the methods. All right, we're going to define another method here called get name. If we can set the name, we can get a name. And this is where you have the idea of setters and getters. So for get name, all I need to do is simply to get that name. So let's go ahead and print. Let's say parent name is, and we're gonna go ahead and print parent dot name. I don't want that. Parent name, that's what I want. All right, so this is set name is one function, or you can better word is a method. So set the name of the parent to get the name of the parent. All right, guys. So this is our parent class. So this is a class. We've seen how to create classes. We've simply created one for a parent. This class has just one attribute, which is called the parent name, and we've seen how to set the name and how to get the name of that. Now let's talk about inheritance, which is what we're talking about here. And what we're gonna do is we're gonna create a new class called child. We're gonna call that class called child. All right, we can simply just say child and do the same thing that we did here. And I'm gonna explain this a little bit better. So in itself, no problem. And we're calling the child constructor again. So we're calling the child constructor, and then we can also define the method for child. I'm gonna copy this method here and modify it here just so we have a method for child. Bear with me to format this correctly. All right, now we have a method for the child. So let's call this one the child method. So we have the child method self, and then we're gonna print calling. Of course, we're calling the child method. But you're asking, where is the inheritance? Right? The way the inheritance comes into play is we have to tell that this child class that we've just created actually comes from parent. All right? If it's like, imagine you're a child, you have to inherit something from your parent. Somebody needs to say it somewhere that this child is inheriting from the parent, right? In the Western world, you do that by legal documents. You have to go to the court and sign all of that, or your birth certificate to prove that this child is actually the birth child of that parent, or somehow. All right. In programming, in Python, the way we're gonna specify that is we're gonna go to the child class that we just created, and we will specify in here to say this child actually inherits from a parent. That's it. So you just go to child and you put this command. You say, all right, these brackets, and you say, all right, parent. So it knows that this child is inheriting from the parent. All right. So whatever the parent has in true inheritance, if you inherit from your parents, all right, whatever the parents have, then the child would have it by default. That's basically what it means. So if a parent has a method called setName, the child gets that method called setName, even though the child doesn't have it in their own definition. But because they've inherited from their parents, they get it. It's like your parent has a house and you've kind of been slacking off, and at some point, you know, your parents' house become your house, even though you didn't build one yourself, but you just get it. All right. So even though this child did not go ahead and implement a method called set name, they just get it from their parents because their parents have it. That's what inheritance at the core is. All right. So let's actually see what that means. So we should go ahead and actually call those particular methods. So let's say C equals child. So we're basically instantiating this class. Very simple thing. So we're simply getting an instance, all right, of child. So C is a child, and I believe we had it as uppercase. So C is a child. Now we know that once we instantiate the class, we can access the methods within that class. All right. So we can say C dot child method. All right. So child method. That's great. All right, no problem with that, right? So there's a method here called child method, so we can access that method within the child. But watch what happens, guys, and this is where the magic of inheritance happens, where you get something even without doing anything. So let's say C dot child and parent. You see, there you have it. Parent method within the child is possible, right? Parent method. So now we have a parent method accessible within this child object, even though there is no parent method in here. This child class doesn't have any parent method. There's no method they call parent method. But if you go up, because I've inherited from this the parent class, they have access to parent method. Guys, that's inheritance at its core. All right. So if I run this, you see it says calling child method when it calls the child method, and then parent method, it prints calling parent method once it calls the parent method. That's inheritance. That's inheritance, guys. So let's actually do some more work with this. We can say child dot set name equals Fru. All right. And if I go ahead and I run this, it set the name Fru. How about we go child dot get name equals, well, in get name we don't have any attribute, so get name should, since the child doesn't have a get name, it's going to inherit the name of the parent. And let's see what happens. It says parent name is Fru. So that's one of the problems with inheritance, because now I specify in here that parent name is Fru. So the beauty of this is two things. One, we see that this is actually calling the parent's method. The child doesn't have any get name method, but it's calling the parent method. And then two, we have to make the program a little bit smart to not say parent name is this when we actually might be referring to a child's name. So, but hopefully we get the idea of inheritance within our programming. So a very, very powerful concept, guys. Inheritance really leads you into all the other concepts that we saw, which would be talking about class, objects, method, inheritance, polymorphism, data abstractions, and encapsulation. So all of this really kind of builds some inheritance within Python. Now, this was a lot, guys. This was a lot. So let's actually switch gears here and talk about the last one concept within this particular lecture, which is the idea of importing external libraries. And as a matter of fact, not just importing them, but using them within Python. So more often than not, you might be trying to do something that somebody has already done, and you don't have to go out and reinvent that wheel. All right. So you can go out and say, okay, I'm trying to drive a car. Somebody has already created a car. Why don't I just borrow that car and focus on driving it? All right. So let's take an example, and that example is to print random numbers on the screen. So let's just go ahead and say, all right, print me a random number between 1 and 10. Guys, it's gonna be hard to do. It's gonna really be hard for you to do, because it's like, also I need to implement a function. You're gonna have to define a function called random, right? And that function would take x, is gonna take y. X is gonna be the mean, y is gonna be the max, and then that function is gonna do something. I don't know what it's gonna do. Let's just say do something, and it's gonna return some value, right, to you, and then you can go ahead and call that random function, guys. But how do you write a function that can generate a random number between some mean value and some max value? But it's challenging. But the beauty of it is you don't have to do it, because somebody somewhere, I would assume smarter than anyone, or at least smarter than me, has already done it. So instead of me trying to reinvent the wheel, why not just take the wheel and use it? So what we do here is, and Python and many programming languages allows us to import external libraries, and that's where the idea of import statement comes from. So there is a library called random on the screen. Now if I import that library, and it's simply it's as simple as saying import random, I can go ahead and say random int equals to, all right, now it's gonna say random. So now I have this random that I've imported. So imagine I didn't import this. Let me wipe this out of the screen. So imagine I just simply said, I just started to say random int equals to random dot, there's nothing, ran int, there's really nothing, right? There's nothing for me to use, because I haven't imported that. I'm trying to use a class in here which I haven't imported, and it's saying that this is unresolved, right? Python PyCharm is even good enough to tell me, right, import this name. I can go ahead and click import, and it says you want to import random, and it does that for me, which is exactly what I did before. All right, so if you're trying to use something external, this random is an external library that we're importing into this particular programming page, into this particular code. And once we have it, now I can access all the methods within that class called random. All right, so it's just like saying random.runInt. So just imagine how we were calling methods to a parent class or to a child class. This is basically what's happening. But instead of you writing this, somebody has written it and put it out there, and you simply just importing that and saying, all right, I'm gonna inherit all the methods from there. Technically not inheriting, but I'm just gonna use all the methods that are available from that particular class. So one of those methods is random int. So run int, and we can specify 0 to 100. And what this would do is gonna generate a random number for us between 0 and 100, and we're gonna print random int. So we're gonna take that number and just print it on the screen. So if I run this, all right, wow, it actually prints 1. That's strange. 70. I've never gotten it to print 1, so I was very surprised by that. Between 1 and 100, it actually prints 1. That was surprising to me. All right, so it prints 70, and each time I run this, it just generates a random number, 71. There you go. It's kind of strange. It prints numbers in clusters. 4. All right, and if you keep running this code, each time it prints a random number. So I haven't implemented a function for this. I simply just imported this from an external library, and that's another very important concept within classes. In Python, you don't have to do all things by yourself, guys. People out there have created many libraries. We call them libraries, that if you're looking for something, you can go out and say, well, I'm trying to generate a random number. Is there any library that somebody has done? More than likely, somebody has done something like that. They package it up into a class and they put it out there. Simply just import that into your Python environment and leverage that to writing your classes, or leverage that to writing your scripts. All right, guys. So that's the concept of object-oriented programming within Python. Just to summarize, guys, I know this was a lot. It was a huge topic. What we've seen here is being able to define classes, class inheritance, and also how to import and use external libraries within Python. Guys, like I said, the very first time I saw this, it blew my mind away. I struggled with this concept, but once it clicks, guys, once it clicks, you can start writing classes like you've never seen before. Anything out there in the real world that you can think of can be a class. Vehicles, airplanes, transportations, meals, student, patient, order, customer, right? Anything that if you have an e-commerce store, any of the things that you're selling can be its own class. As long as it has attributes, you can encapsulate that into a class, and that class can have attributes, and it can also have functions, And a function within a class is simply called a method. And once you have your methods, you can now start using that methods to do things. For example, we had a car method, we used it to do things. We had a parent, and we were able to use a child and inherit from that parent, right? And at the very end, we were able to generate random numbers by just finding some external library out there called import random with this one single statement, and we're able to generate random numbers. All right, guys, so there you have it through here. Thanks for joining for this particular module 8 of our series on Python for beginners. Guys, I hope you found this valuable. If you do, please consider subscribing. The link to my GitHub and all this code will be available in the description below wherever you're watching this video. So guys, check that out. Share this with somebody that might find value out of it. Our next lecture will be talking about IO, so input, output, and operations within Python. Really excited and looking forward to that, guys. Thank you for joining. I will see you in our next lecture.